My name is Sienna Moreno, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I'd have told you my family was complicated but loyal. Now I know better. Now I understand that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who cut the deepest. It was a sweltering July evening in Austin, the kind where the heat clings to your skin like a second layer. I pulled up to my parents' sprawling suburban house, the kind of place where the driveway is always freshly power washed and the garden is meticulously curated like a magazine spread. My 2016 Civic with its chipped paint and coffee-stained seats felt wildly out of place next to the shiny Range Rovers and sleek Teslas crowding the cul-de-sac. I parked at the far end of the street away from the judging eyes of family friends and distant relatives who'd long written me off as the odd one out. The event. My older brother, Mateo's 40th birthday. A celebration so grand it could have passed for a small wedding. Mateo, the golden child, the family pride, the one who had never had a blemish in our parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was the one who had to fight for every sliver of recognition, the one who got the cheap seat at the family table both literally and metaphorically. I walked up the cobblestone path, the sounds of live jazz spilling out from the backyard, the sharp clinking of champagne glasses slicing through the humid air. I straightened my simple black dress, the one I'd found on clearance at a downtown boutique, and clutched the neatly wrapped leather journal I'd bought for Mateo. An inside joke about his long-abandoned dream of becoming a writer before he climbed the corporate ladder. I knew it wouldn't match the Rolex or the rare scotch he'd likely be showered with tonight, but it felt personal, meaningful. A young woman in a crisp white blouse and black trousers stood at the door, clipboard in hand. She glanced up with a polished, polite smile. The kind that said she'd been trained to deal with all sorts of people, even the ones who didn't quite belong. "Name?" she asked, already scanning the guest list without truly looking at me. "Sienna Moreno," I replied, forcing a smile and adjusting the strap of my worn leather purse. Her eyes flicked down the list, and then she paused, her brows knitting together. "Oh?" she murmured, glancing back at the paper before meeting my eyes with a hint of pity. "You're listed as a +1 under the family section." I felt my stomach tighten. A +1. Not even my own line, just an afterthought tacked onto the family block. I forced another smile, my cheeks stiffening. "That's fine," I said, my voice light but my chest tightening. "Really?" She handed me a small white sticker that read "Guest" in generic black font. I took it without another word, peeling the backing off and pressing it onto my dress right above my heart, where it pinched the fabric slightly. I stepped inside, my heels clicking against the polished marble as I navigated the maze of unfamiliar faces and polished conversations. The air was thick with perfume, expensive cologne, and the faint smoky aroma of grilled steak. The house had been transformed. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a warm golden glow over the crowded rooms. Waiters moved through the throng's trays, balanced expertly as they offered crystal glasses filled with aged bourbon and frosted flutes of Prosecco. The walls, usually lined with family photos, were now adorned with blown-up portraits of Mateo at various life stages. Baby Mateo with a toothless grin. Teenage Mateo in a football uniform and adult. Mateo in a tailored suit. Arms folded confidently. Eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who has never known failure. I lingered at the edge of the room, trying to steady my breathing. It was as if I'd walked into a shrine, a temple dedicated to my brother's many achievements. My eyes scanned the crowd looking for my parents. When I finally found them, they were at the center of the room. My father's arm draped around Mateo's broad shoulders. My mother dabbing at the corner of her eyes with a silk handkerchief as a friend leaned in to whisper something that made them both laugh. They hadn't even noticed me walk in. I headed toward the back of the room where a small round table stood half hidden behind a marble column, conveniently out of view of the main festivities. My place card, written in plain black ink on a white slip of paper, sat alone among the glittering gold ones. My name noticeably absent from the head table. I set Mateo's gift down, smoothing the ribbon as I took my seat. The chair wobbled slightly beneath me, one leg shorter than the others. I adjusted my dress and glanced around, noting the stark contrast between my isolated spot and the laughter radiating from the head table. A waiter passed by and I snagged a glass of sparkling water, clutching it tightly as I stared down at the rippling surface, my distorted reflection staring back at me. I wasn't just a +1 tonight, I was a ghost, a shadow, an afterthought. As I took a shaky sip, my phone vibrated in my purse. I slipped it out and glanced at the screen. A text from my cousin Amelia. "You here, just saw your folks?" They look intense. You okay? I let out a slow breath before typing back, yeah, just settling in, it's fine. But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. I took another sip. The bubbles sharp against my tongue. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe for once I wouldn't be the outsider at my own family's celebration. Maybe they'd notice me this time. Maybe I'd matter. But as the night unfolded, I'd learned just how deeply my family had already written me out of their story. The evening dragged on each passing minute, feeling like a slow drip from a leaky faucet. I watched as my parents glided from circle to circle, their laughter echoing off the marble floors, their arms wrapped around Mateo and his polished fiancée Lila. The three of them looked like a perfectly curated family portrait, a picture of success and unity. And I sipped my sparkling water, my fingers tightening around the glass. Each time my mother's laugh cut through the air, sharp, deliberate, the kind she used when she wanted to signal approval. As I sat there, I felt the familiar creeping sense of being an outsider in my own bloodline. My mind wandered back to a dozen smaller slights over the years. The missed birthdays, the forgotten invitations, the time my graduation party had been accidentally scheduled for the same day as one of Mateo's football banquets. It wasn't just oversight, it was a pattern. My thoughts were interrupted when a tall, impeccably dressed server approached a gleaming silver tray balanced effortlessly on one hand. He bent slightly, his neatly trimmed beard catching the golden light as he leaned closer. "Ma'am, would you like some champagne?" he asked. His voice smooth but distant, like a well-rehearsed line in a play. I looked at the flute, its fine bubbles rising in a delicate dance, then shook my head. "No thanks," I replied, forcing a tight smile. "Just the water." He nodded, straightened, and disappeared into the crowd, his black dress shoes whispering against the polished floor. I set my glass down and let my gaze drift across the room, catching snippets of conversations. "She's the one with the nonprofit, right? No, that's his fiancée, Sienna. I think she does something with marketing. I heard she's still single. Such a shame at her age." I bit the inside of my cheek, the metallic taste of blood sharp against my tongue. They never really saw me, just the shadows of their assumptions. As I sat there, a hush fell over the crowd. The band slowed their tempo, the last few notes of a jazzy number lingering in the air before fading into silence. My father stepped onto a small stage at the front of the room, his hands raised to quiet the guests. The overhead lights dimmed and a soft spotlight framed his figure, casting his face in sharp relief. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice effortlessly, commanding the room's attention. "Thank you all for joining us tonight as we celebrate a very special milestone for my son Mateo." The guests erupted into applause, the sound crashing against the walls like a sudden summer storm. I clapped along, though my hands felt numb, my palms tingling from the tension building in my chest. As many of you know, my father continued glancing down at his notes before looking back up with a practiced paternal smile. Mateo has always been a beacon of pride for our family. From his early days on the football field to his rapid rise in the corporate world, he has never failed to make us proud. The crowd murmured in agreement, heads nodding, glasses raised in silent toasts. My mother dabbed at her eyes, a tissue clutched delicately between her manicured fingers, her smile stretching a bit too wide, her eyes gleaming with carefully curated pride. And tonight, my father went on, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. We celebrate not just another year of his life, but a lifetime of accomplishments. The lights behind him flared to life and a screen unfolded from the ceiling, its surface crackling briefly before settling into a crisp, high-definition image of a young Mateo, his face beaming with youthful confidence as he clutched a trophy nearly half his size. The slideshow continued, each photo a carefully selected moment of his journey: graduations, corporate awards, travel snapshots with Lila, candid shots of family dinners where I was conspicuously absent. My stomach twisted as the images flicked by, each one a reminder of the many times I had been quietly erased from the narrative of our family's success. The montage ended with a professional portrait of Mateo in a sharply tailored suit, arms crossed, jaw set, his eyes radiating the confidence of a man who had never known true failure. The room erupted into another wave of applause, my mother rising to her feet, her eyes glistening. My father standing beside her, his chest puffed out with pride. I stayed seated, my hands clenched into fists beneath the table, nails biting into my palms. I felt my breath coming in short, sharp bursts, my pulse a rapid drumbeat in my ears. As the applause died down, my father leaned into the microphone again, his voice dropping into a more intimate, conspiratorial tone. And now, he said, his eyes glittering as they found mine in the shadowed corner of the room. "We'd like to invite someone very special to say a few words." My heart dropped, my pulse freezing in my veins. He couldn't possibly mean, "Please welcome my daughter Sienna Moreno to share a few thoughts about her brother on this special night." The spotlight swung my way, the harsh, unfiltered light blinding me for a moment as I squinted against it. I felt every eye in the room turn in my direction, the murmur of whispers rippling through the crowd like a rising tide. I rose to my feet slowly, my chair scraping against the marble with a painful screeching sound. My mind raced, 1,000 unspoken words swirling behind my clenched teeth as I made my way to the small stage, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I reached the microphone, its cool metal stem trembling beneath my grip. I glanced back at my parents, their faces expectant, their smiles tight and polished, and then at Mateo, who met my gaze for the briefest moment before looking away, his jaw tightening. I took a deep breath, my chest heaving as I leaned into the mic. "Well," I began, my voice echoing through the room, my eyes locking on the faces of the people who had always seen me as an afterthought, a supporting character in someone else's story. "I suppose it's time to set a few things straight." A hush fell over the room, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your heart race. The spotlight felt like a physical weight pinning me in place. Every eye in the room focused on me, waiting, expecting. I cleared my throat, my fingers tightening around the mic as I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach your eyes. I could see my mother's gaze flicker with something between nervousness and expectation. My father's jaw set in that familiar, unyielding line, his head cocked just slightly, daring me to misstep. "Thank you for the warm welcome." I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in my chest. "Mateo, you've always been the golden boy, the one who never fails to make everyone proud." I paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. And that's quite the legacy to live up to. A few scattered chuckles broke the tension, but I ignored them, my eyes drifting back to the photo montage still frozen on the screen behind me. Mateo in his football gear, Mateo shaking hands with some CEO, Mateo on a yacht with Lila, their perfect smiles framed by a sunset so picturesque it might as well have been painted. But I want to share a different side of Mateo. I continued, my voice sharpening slightly, the edge slipping into my tone like a knife sliding into flesh. The brother who once borrowed my car for a summer and returned it with 3 different warning lights on and a cracked bumper. The brother who forgot to pay me back for bailing him out of that parking ticket fiasco in college. The brother who once dropped my laptop down a flight of stairs during a frat party and promised to take care of it before ghosting me for a month. A few more uneasy chuckles. My mother's eyes narrowed, her polished smile slipping for just a second before she caught herself, her hand gripping my father's arm a bit tighter. "But hey, that's what siblings are for, right?" I added, forcing a lightness into my voice that felt foreign, unnatural, to pick each other up, dust each other off, and pretend the dents and scratches don't matter. I took a steadying breath, my heart still racing, but my mind sharpening, a strange, defiant calm settling over me as I leaned into the microphone, my eyes cutting back to Mateo, whose jaw was now visibly clenched, his eyes fixed firmly on his half-empty champagne glass. "But here's the thing about family," I said, letting my gaze sweep over the crowd, taking in the tight, uncomfortable smiles, the averted eyes, the half-raised glasses frozen in mid-toast. "It's supposed to be about more than just loyalty to one person. It's supposed to be about support, about showing up for each other, about being seen, not just when it's convenient or when there's a camera around, but all the time." I straightened, my shoulders squaring as I felt the words rising within me, decades of resentment and silent disappointments sharpening into a blade. And maybe that's why I've always struggled at these gatherings. I continued, my voice steady now, each word landing like a stone dropped into still water. Because I've spent years trying to convince myself that I belonged, that I was part of this perfect family you all love to brag about at cocktail parties and charity galas. I felt my pulse quicken as I glanced at my parents. My mother's smile now a rigid frozen mask, my father's eyes darkening, his jaw twitching ever so slightly. "But I see it now," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, the microphone amplifying my words until they filled every corner of the room. I see the carefully edited version of our family story that's been curated for nights like this. And I'm done trying to fit into it. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd, the faint clinking of glasses and shifting of chairs barely audible over the soft, looping jazz track playing in the background. Mateo's face had turned a shade paler, his lips pressing into a thin, bloodless line. His fiancée, Lila's eyes wide, her manicured hand frozen mid-sip. I took a small step back from the mic, letting the moment stretch, letting the silence do the talking for once. "And so," I said, forcing a final brittle smile as I met my mother's gaze, the disappointment and anger flashing behind her carefully lined eyes. "I'll raise my glass not just to you, Mateo, but to the parts of this family that never made it into the slideshow. To the forgotten, the overlooked, the ones who keep quiet and fade into the background while the spotlight shines elsewhere." I turned slightly, lifting my still full glass of sparkling water in a small solitary toast. To all the plus ones who never got their own line on the guest list. I set the glass down with a soft, deliberate clink, the sound somehow deafening in the sudden stunned quiet of the room. Without another word, I stepped off the stage, the bright spotlight snapping off behind me as I crossed the marble floor, my heels clicking with each deliberate echoing step. I felt dozens of eyes on my back, felt the unspoken judgments and whispered speculations tightening around me like a noose. But I kept walking, my heart a fierce, steady drumbeat in my chest. As I reached the exit, I glanced back over my shoulder, catching a final glimpse of my parents' faces, their carefully constructed masks cracking the thin veneer of control slipping just a bit at the edges. I smiled, small and sharp, a quiet, unspoken promise. This wasn't over. I didn't look back as I stepped out of the glittering chaos of Mateo's party, the heavy oak door swinging shut behind me, muffling the stunned murmurs and scattered whispers that followed my exit. The warm summer air hit me like a wave, thick and humid, clinging to my skin as I crossed the wide stone patio and made my way down the driveway, my heels clicking sharply against the smooth, sun-warmed pavers. My heart still raced, my pulse pounding in my ears, but with each step, the tightness in my chest began to ease, the pressure that had built up over years of small slights and quiet erasures slowly releasing like air hissing from a cracked valve. I reached my car, my battered Civic parked awkwardly between two sleek black SUVs, and yanked the door open, sliding into the driver's seat and letting my head fall back against the worn headrest. I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing my breathing to slow, willing my hands to stop shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, the cool leather grounding me, pulling me back from the edge of a full-blown panic attack. My phone buzzed in my purse, the sharp, insistent vibration rattling against a stray lipstick tube and a pack of mints. I fumbled for it, my fingers still trembling as I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Emilia. I let out a long, shaky breath, my shoulders slumping slightly as I swiped the screen to answer. "Hey." I managed, my voice coming out a bit hoarse like I'd just run a mile. "Oh my God, Sienna," she whispered, her voice crackling slightly through the cheap Bluetooth connection. "What the hell was that?" I was standing by the bar and I swear I could feel the air freeze when you started talking. I forced a small, bitter laugh, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. "Yeah, well, I figured it was time someone said something. I'm surprised you made it out of there in one piece." Amelia continued, her tone somewhere between shock and admiration. "Your mom looked like she was going to faint, and your dad? I've never seen him that red. He looked like he might actually burst a blood vessel." I snorted, the sound harsh and unsteady, the faint echo of my own voice ringing in my ears. "Good," I muttered, shifting in my seat as I glanced at the massive shadowed house behind me, its lights still blazing like a beacon of misplaced pride. "They deserve a little shock to the system. Listen," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "I'm proud of you, Sienna. I know it probably doesn't mean much right now, but that took guts." I closed my eyes again, leaning back against the headrest, the weight of her words settling over me like a warm, heavy blanket. "Thanks," I whispered, my throat tightening. I couldn't keep pretending." "Not anymore." "I get it," she replied, her tone softening. "And for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. You've always been the one holding back, trying to keep the peace, and they've never appreciated it. Maybe it's time they finally see the real you." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, cool against my overheated skin, and quickly brushed it away, my pulse still pounding in my ears. "Yeah," I whispered, my voice breaking slightly. "Maybe." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint hum of her car engine in the background and the distant chirping of cicadas in the thick, humid air around me. "I should go," I said, finally. my voice steadier now, the tears drying on my cheeks. I need to get home. Of course, Amelia replied quickly. But Sienna, don't let them twist this. Whatever happens next, remember tonight, remember that you stood up for yourself. Don't let them make you the villain. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, her words striking a little too close to a fear I hadn't quite let myself face. I won't, I promised, my voice firm. The words settling like a stone in my gut. I'm done playing their games. Good, she said, her tone fierce. Call me if you need to vent. Okay, anytime. I will, I replied, my voice softening again as a faint, genuine smile pulled at the corners of my lips. Thanks, Em. Anytime, she whispered, and then the line went dead. The silence in my car suddenly feeling heavier, more oppressive. The weight of the night crashing back down around me. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles turning white against the smooth, cracked leather. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing the tightness in my chest to loosen. The anxiety still coiled around my ribs, slowly unraveling. Then, without another glance at the glowing house behind me, I pulled out of the driveway, my tires crunching against the gravel as I turned onto the winding, tree-lined road that led back to my tiny, cluttered apartment on the other side of town. As I drove, the cool night air streaming through the open window and whipping my hair back from my face, I felt the faintest flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. The drive back to my apartment felt like a slow, shaky exhale. The streets were mostly empty, the city lights casting long, flickering shadows across the cracked asphalt, the occasional car passing by like a ghost. I kept the windows down. The humid night air brushing against my skin, cooling the last traces of anger still simmering beneath the surface. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, the security light above my parking spot buzzed to life. Its harsh yellow glare reflecting off my car's dusty hood. I climbed out the door, creaking on its hinges, and glanced up at the old brick building. Its windows dark, the air thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and distant car exhaust. I grabbed my purse and keys, my mind still replaying the stunned, frozen expressions on my parents' faces as I had stepped off that stage, the sharp, disbelieving murmurs rippling through the crowd as I walked away. I felt a small, bitter smile tug at the corner of my mouth as I climbed the stairs to my second-floor unit. The metal railing cool and slightly damp beneath my fingers. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with the faint, lingering scent of takeout and old coffee. I dropped my purse onto the small, cluttered kitchen counter and kicked off my shoes. The worn wooden floor cool against my bare feet. I reached for the light switch, hesitated for a moment, then let my hand fall back to my side, choosing to move through the darkened apartment. My steps slow and deliberate, my mind still buzzing with adrenaline and unresolved tension. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the springs creaking beneath my weight, and stared down at my phone, its screen still glowing faintly from the passenger seat where I had tossed it earlier. I reached over, grabbed it, and tapped the screen, my eyes squinting against the sudden harsh brightness. A dozen missed texts. Amelia. You okay, Amelia? Call me if you need to talk. Unknown. Number Sienna. It's Lila. We need to talk. Mom. Call me. Now, Mom. Sienna. This is not acceptable. Call me Dad. What the hell was that? I let out a long, shaky breath, my thumb hovering over my mother's messages. The tight, suffocating pressure I had felt on that stage slowly creeping back into my chest. I locked the screen, tossed the phone onto the bed beside me, and leaned back against the cool, slightly scratchy headboard. My eyes drifting up to the cracked ceiling, the faint shadows from the streetlights outside shifting slowly across the plaster. I closed my eyes, my mind still spinning, the adrenaline still buzzing through my veins, my pulse still racing despite the dark, quiet stillness of my apartment. What now? The question echoed in my mind, sharp and insistent, like a blade twisting slowly in my gut. I had finally spoken. My truth shattered the carefully curated facade my family had built around me. But now what? But I forced myself to take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the slightly stale, humid air, my hands gripping the edge of the mattress until my knuckles ached. I needed a plan. I needed to stop reacting. Stop letting them dictate the terms of our relationship. Stop letting them erase me, rewrite me, define me. I sat up slowly, the mattress creaking beneath me, and swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet sinking into the thin, slightly frayed carpet. As I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees, my head dropping into my hands, I would not be erased. I took another deep breath, my chest tightening, my fingers pressing into my scalp as the anger began to rise again, slow and steady like a tide pulling back before a storm. I reached for my phone, unlocked the screen, and opened my email app. My fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled through the long list of unread messages, junk mail, and automated reminders. Then I found it. An email from my accountant dated 3 months ago. A subject line that I had barely glanced at in the chaos of work deadlines and late-night Netflix binges. Subject: Property Ownership Review. Moreno Investments. I clicked it. My heart pounding, my breath catching in my throat as the message loaded, the small black text slowly materializing on the cracked, slightly smudged screen. Dear Sienna, as part of our annual review of your financial holdings, I wanted to confirm your current ownership status on the Moreno family properties, specifically the downtown office building and the Westlake house, both of which remain listed under your name. Please let me know if you have any questions or if you'd like to discuss potential tax strategies for these assets. Best, Rosa. I stared at the screen, my mind racing, the pieces slowly clicking into place, the faint, bitter taste of realization creeping into the back of my throat. They had written me off, cropped me out, forgotten me, but they had never bothered to take my name off the deeds. A slow, fierce grin spread across my face, my heart pounding, my pulse racing with a sudden sharp clarity that cut through the lingering fog of anger and betrayal. I took a deep, steadying breath, my fingers tightening around my phone, my mind already racing ahead, calculating, plotting, planning. They thought they had erased me. They were wrong. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing angrily against the wooden nightstand, its screen lighting up the darkened room with each insistent vibration. I reached over my hand, fumbling against the cool surface, knocking over an empty water glass before finally grabbing the phone. A dozen missed calls. My mother. My father. Mateo. Even Lila. I let the phone fall back onto the bed, the notification still flashing on the screen. The small vibrating hum like the distant rapid-fire beat of a helicopter blade. I ignored it, my mind still groggy, my head throbbing slightly from the emotional hangover of the night before. But as I sat up, pushing my tangled hair back from my face and rubbing the sleep from my eyes, the sharp, clear memory of my accountant's email cut through the haze like a blade. I reached for my laptop, flipping it open and tapping the power button, the screen flaring to life with a faint hum. I typed in my password, my fingers still stiff and clumsy, and opened my financial documents, scrolling through the long list of properties, investments, and assets I had accumulated over the years. There it was, the Westlake house. The same sprawling 2-story brick home my parents had lived in for nearly 2 decades. The same house where Mateo's birthday party had unfolded the night before. The same house where my parents had built their carefully curated, picture-perfect lives, complete with manicured lawns, imported marble floors, and custom-built wine cellars. Still in my name. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening, the full weight of the realization settling over me like a heavy, unfamiliar coat. They hadn't just erased me from the family narrative. They had taken for granted that I would never push back, never fight, never reclaim what was mine. I felt a small, fierce grin spread across my face, my fingers tightening around the edges of my laptop as the pieces finally clicked into place. The fog of years of quiet resentment and self-doubt lifting like smoke from a dying fire. I took a deep breath, the tightness in my chest easing, my mind sharpening, my pulse steadying as I clicked over to my email, opened a new message and began to type. To Rosa, accounting firm, come subject: immediate action required. Property ownership review. Rosa. I would like to confirm that the Westlake property remains in my name as previously discussed. Please begin the process of transferring any outstanding utility accounts, tax records, and maintenance agreements back into my control, effective immediately. Additionally, please prepare a formal notice of termination for any existing tenancy agreements or informal occupancy arrangements currently in place. Thank you for your continued support, Sienna Moreno. I hit send, the faint whoosh of the outgoing message echoing through the small, quiet apartment. My heart pounding, my fingers tingling with the rush of adrenaline that came with finally fully taking back control. I closed the laptop, leaned back against the headboard, and let out a long, shaky breath. The knot of anxiety and resentment that had been coiled in my chest for years, slowly unraveling, the tension melting away like ice under a hot summer sun. I felt my phone buzz again, the screen lighting up with another incoming call, my mother's name flashing across the screen. The small thumbnail photo of her carefully styled, immaculately polished face staring back at me, her eyes hard, her lips pulled into a tight, disapproving line. I let it ring, A minute later, it buzzed again. My father this time. I ignored it, my fingers tightening around the edge of my laptop. The small sharp crack of the plastic casing under my grip, barely audible over the steady, insistent hum of the vibrating phone. Finally, the buzzing stopped, the phone falling silent. The apartment settling back into the familiar, muffled stillness of early morning. I glanced down, my heart still racing, my pulse still pounding in my ears, and opened my voicemail app, my thumb hovering over the flashing red notification. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing, my heart thundering, and then tapped the screen. The phone's small, tinny speaker crackling to life. Sienna. My mother's voice crackled, the carefully controlled tone of her polished socialite persona. Slipping slightly, a faint, ragged edge creeping into her words. Call me. Now we need to talk about last night, about what you said, about what you've done. A long, sharp pause, the faint rustle of background noise filtering through the tiny speaker. This is not how we do things, Sienna. You don't just walk away, you don't just abandon your family like this. Call me back. We need to fix this. I let out a short, bitter laugh, the sound harsh and unfamiliar in the quiet, empty apartment. Fix this. I deleted the message, the small, satisfying click of the trash icon, like the final sharp crack of a breaking bone. Then I stood stretched and walked over to the small, cluttered kitchen. The floor cooled beneath my bare feet as I filled the coffee pot. The sharp, bitter smell of fresh grounds filling the air as the machine hummed to life. As I waited for the coffee to brew, I leaned against the counter, my eyes drifting to the small, framed photo of my parents and me at my high school graduation, the three of us smiling stiffly at the camera. My father's arm wrapped tightly around Mateo's shoulder, my mother's hand resting lightly on my back. Her perfectly manicured nails barely grazing the thin fabric of my graduation gown. I reached over, picked up the frame, and turned it face down, the small, sharp click of the glass against the countertop echoing through the quiet kitchen. I poured myself a cup of coffee, leaned back against the counter, and took a long, slow sip. The hot, bitter liquid burning my throat, the heat spreading through my chest, settling deep in my bones. I had been erased, forgotten, overlooked. But not anymore. Story 2. Hello, this is Marlene. I was not informed of my parents' migration, disposed of my pictures in the garbage, as if I had never been there. My kid located them, he sobbed. I then understood that they hadn't just forgotten us, they didn't anticipate what happened next, but they wanted us gone. Tell me where you're viewing from and what time it is there before we start. Leave a comment. Because the individuals who ought to love you the most have silently deleted you in the past. This is your tale. It nearly seemed like an error when Kendra's message appeared on my phone. Only a single line. It would be good to meet you and Eli for dinner on Sunday. Noah emojis. I hope all is okay with you. That's all. I looked at it for a while. I wasn't sure if I should tell Eli at all, but as soon as I did, his entire face brightened. Really? Oh, he said, as if Christmas had arrived early. Grandma's is where we are heading. I wanted to refuse. This isn't how families should operate. I wanted to say. Months of radio silence. Then, as if nothing had occurred, an invitation appeared. However, I was unable to remove that expression off his face, so I nodded and grinned. Yes, dear Sunday meal. I was packing his backpack that night with a sketchbook and an extra shirt. I told myself that I wasn't the focus of this. Fake politeness and past hurts were irrelevant. It was for Eli to give him the impression that he still had a place, even if I didn't. The summer light that arrived on Sunday gave everything a gentler appearance than it actually had. The property appeared to constantly have immaculately groomed grass flower beds as we came into the driveway. It wasn't the same house yet. There wasn't a single toy out of place. Not to me. Open the door. Kendra. Wide open arms, sharp familiar scent. Lavender. Lavender at all times. She kissed my cheek and remarked, "You look great," as if we hadn't communicated properly for a year. "You're becoming so large." Eli, eager to see his relatives, he raced past her. With my senses keenly tuned in, I moved in more slowly. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of garlic bread. From the den came laughter. However, nobody mentioned that they had missed you. With his eyes fixed on the game, Cliff nodded from the couch. Verna was chopping lemons for her tea while standing at the kitchen island. When she turned, her jaw was tight and her back was rigid. "Oh," she said. "You're ahead of schedule. Just 10 minutes, I said. She didn't respond. Continued slicing. I didn't realize it until supper was being prepared. The table was almost crowded. There were chairs, drinks were poured, napkins folded. However, neither Eli nor I had a slot. There was room for everyone else. Even the children. I waited for someone to see me hovering for a moment. Nobody did. After entering the kitchen, I stealthily took 2 folding chairs out of the pantry. I tried not to sting as I carried them out myself, one in each hand. Eli was standing next to me. "Perplexed, Mom," he muttered. "They overlooked us." I smiled at him, my teeth feeling like sandpaper. "Baby. They most likely simply ran out of time." However, I was aware dinner went by like a scene in a movie I never had a part in. Over my head, conversations were dancing, promotions, soccer matches, and vacation packages. Nobody inquired about my well-being. Eli was not questioned about school. At our own table, we seemed to be props. Our entire family was holding hands when Eli took a crayon painting out of his bag after we had finished our meal. He had put "Family Forever" in large green letters in front of this very house. He sprinted over to Verna and gave her the object with both hands. "Grandma, I made this for you." After glancing at it for a mere 3 seconds, she silently put it next to the shoe rack. Didn't even give him credit. I clenched my jaw. Eli returned to our seats and leaned in my direction. "Did she like it, in your opinion?" I gazed at his serene courage and optimistic tiny face. "She did, of course," I said, a falsehood. Everyone had to see the drawing, so I wanted to take it and tape it to the middle of the refrigerator, but I didn't. Since we were being treated like afterthoughts, I allowed it to remain there like an afterthought. Eli's plate remained empty as dessert was being served, but nobody noticed. I silently served him, reaching for the pie myself. The discussions went on as if we were composed of glass, transparent and simple to see through. Ignorance is simple. When the time came to depart, I got up and assisted Eli in putting on his jacket. Everyone who volunteered for an embrace received one from him. He was patted on the head by Verna. We were even after Kendra gave me a Tupperware container filled with leftovers. I turned to face the wall of family photos as I was about to leave. They had renovated it, better lighting, new frames, and thoughtful placement. However, something was lacking. Not a single photo of Eli was absent. Not me, just flawless smiles from a carefully selected family. My heart clenched as I stood there, something I hadn't experienced since Dean's departure. That same icy awareness that I no longer belong here. I guided Eli out by placing a hand on his shoulder. He asked, "Can we come again next Sunday?" as he glanced up at me. I didn't respond. I simply closed the car door after saying goodnight. As I secured Eli in the rear seat, I remained silent. He continued to hum softly and smile completely, unaware of the silent conflict going on behind my eyes. However, I stopped as I circled the vehicle to the driver's side. The house was covered in a yellow haze from the porch light. There are stories on its walls that I no longer belong to. They're also right outside the open window. I could see it clearly. The framed memories on the photo wall were precisely in line Kendra and her children. At the beach. Liam's graduation from kindergarten. I recognized the picture of my ex-husband Dean standing proudly next to Verna. The 3 of us used to be there, but in this version, I was cropped out and a strip of background blur took my place. My fingers clenched around the car door handle as I stared, frozen. I was reminded by Eli's voice from the back seat. "Can we grab some ice cream on the way home?" "Mom?" I nodded and forced a smile. "Sure, baby." We drove in silence. He talked about the dog Kendra got for her kids. I nodded along, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that wall. My mother hadn't just removed me from her home. She had deleted us from her memories, from her story. Carefully, intentionally. Back home, I tucked Eli into bed. He kissed my cheek, curled up with his stuffed otter, and fell asleep. Within minutes, I stayed in the doorway for a while, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Then I sat down on the couch, pulled out my phone, and started scrolling through old family group texts. They hadn't been active in months. No new messages, no check-ins, no photos. I opened my gallery, started going through the pictures I'd taken over the years. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, beach days. I stopped at one. Verna holding Eli the day he was born. She had insisted we print it for her wall. She said, "First grandson deserves to be seen every day." But now, not even a corner of that image remained. A few days later, I decided to stop by their house again alone this time. Edgar, their neighbor, had asked for my chicken enchilada casserole recipe, and I figured I could drop off a dish while I was at it. When I pulled into the driveway, the place felt colder somehow. Not physically, but emotionally muted. I rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Cliff opened the door. He looked surprised, but not unkind. "Hey, Marlene," he said, stepping aside. "Everything." "All right, I just brought this over for Edgar," I said, lifting the foil-covered pan. "Figured I'd save him from eating another frozen pizza." Cliff chuckled. "That man's blood must be 40% cheese by now." We stood there for a bit. I took a breath, kept my voice even. I noticed the photo wall was different. The other night, Cliff scratched the back of his neck. "Oh yes? Verna? Redid it. Wanted to freshen things up?" She explained. "I didn't see any images of Eli," I said cautiously. "Or me." He avoided my eyes, moving on his feet. "Well, you know how women are with decorating," he grumbled. I remain out of it. I looked at him. Really looked. This man, my son's grandfather, had nothing to say. No protest, no surprise, just detachment, masquerading as neutrality. "You kept out of it during my divorce too," silently I said. Cliff parted his lips, then shut them. Any debate was overshadowed by his quiet. As I walked back to my car, I gave him the casserole and turned away. A strange lucidity began to creep in. I wasn't hated by Cliff. Although he was feeble, he wasn't unkind. Because they allow harm to occur and claim not to become involved. Men are just as dangerous as those who throw blows. I opened my laptop at home and started removing pictures, only the ones that brought to memory how hard I struggled to fit in. Not all of them. I wasn't going to erase my past. In order for anything fresh to grow, I was pruning it, removing the dead bits. Later that evening, Eli crawled into bed next to me after patting himself out of his room in socks. Under the sheets, his little fingers touched mine. "Mom," he muttered. "Yes, dear." He paused. "If I weren't your child, do you think they would hang my picture?" My breath caught in my chest like an unexpected blow. "Yes, they would." I wanted to say I was unable to lie, even though I wanted to. Rather, I kissed the top of his head and clasped his hand. I said, "You don't need a wall to prove you matter. I've never done anything better than you." But I made a secret vow in the dark. Never again would they harm him. After he asked me that question, I didn't sleep. His little voice continued to reverberate in my ears and bounce about inside of me, as if it were unable to go. I wondered how many more ways they could find to convince us we weren't related, while I lay there in the dark looking up at the ceiling. I walked into the kitchen the following morning as if I were wading through wet cement, eyes distracted, coffee in hand. Eli sat calmly at the counter and used a stubby crayon to doodle. He didn't sing to himself as usual or beg for breakfast. I didn't like how familiar it felt. Yet something inside him had darkened. I sat in the car outside the grocery shop after I dropped him off at school, trying to find the strength to inside. Out of sheer instinct, I took out my phone at that moment and went to Facebook. A picture vivid was the first thing that struck me. Loud and festive. Kids, streamers, and balloons swarm Kendra's living room, with cousins all around him. Liam stood in the middle, smiling with icing on his cheeks. Everyone but Eli. "Thank you to everyone who helped make Liam's birthday so memorable," the caption said. "I'm really thankful for our close-knit community." I froze as I gazed at the screen. I was completely unaware that there was a party. No communication, no invitation, not a passive-aggressive one either. "I'm hoping you're free." My hands began to tremble. There was no tag for my name, there was no mention of Eli's. Beside the cake were pictures of Verna and Cliff grinning. Kendra's spouse, Kendra's closest companion. Even the neighbor Edgar was grinning in the distance. Not us, though. It wasn't simply a celebration we missed. That night, we had once more been purposefully left out. Eli stepped up next to me and peered over my shoulder while I was on the sofa going through my phone. "Was it Liam's gathering?" he inquired. It was too late when I attempted to tilt the phone away. I responded softly, "Yeah, buddy." He blinked. Why wasn't I invited? There was a roaring sensation in my throat. "I'm not sure," I muttered. Perhaps that was a little matter. Perhaps they simply forgot. He remained silent for a while, then he straightened his posture. "Is there anything we can bake for him?" he inquired. "Like cupcakes. I could use his favorite colors to embellish them. He adores blue and green." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to shout, but I was unable to take away his glimmer of hope. Not quite yet. Yes. My voice was hoarse as I spoke. What a lovely concept. We baked together the next morning. Even though the majority of the batter ended up on the counter, I let him to stir it and crack the eggs. We added shaky little hearts, blue dots, green swirls, and vanilla cupcake icing. As we packed them up and drove across town, he grinned proudly. The entire journey there, as if it were made of glass, he held the box. He leaped out of the car as soon as we arrived at Taverna's house and ran to the porch as if it were his very first day. With my heart thumping in my ears, I trailed behind more slowly. He rapped. After a few seconds, the door opened. It appeared as though Verna had not anticipated anyone as she stood there in her robe. Her gaze swept over me and then across to Eli, even though her car was in the driveway. "Hello, dear." Startled, she said. Eli used both hands to hold up the crate. To celebrate Liam's birthday, we baked cupcakes. In person. "I wanted to wish you a happy birthday." Verna gave a tight, nervous smile. She stepped out just enough to block the doorway. "Now's not a great time, sweetheart. Maybe next weekend." "All right." Eli's arms didn't move. I just wanted to offer them to him." She leaned out gently, pushing the package back toward him. "I'll tell Liam." "You said, hey." Then the door closed. Eli turned around slowly. He didn't cry. He didn't ask questions. He just walked back to the car and climbed into his seat. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He gazed down at the package he was holding. "They must dislike vanilla." "Oh," he said. That sentence was like a strike to my chest. My fingers hurt from holding on to the wheel so tightly I remained silent. I couldn't, since my anger wasn't very loud. It was focused, orderly, and neat. He sat quietly at the kitchen table when we arrived home. As if they still had significance, I carefully placed the cupcakes in the refrigerator after unpacking them, as if they weren't only a reminder of our unwanted presence. That evening, he tucked his stuffed daughter close to him as he crawled under the covers after story time and his shower. "Mom." Silently, he said. I sat next to him and switched off the light. "Yes, darling. They might also love me if I were more like Liam." The fire burned up my throat as I swallowed it, whispered no, and leaned in to kiss his forehead. "Perhaps they would behave as though they loved you." I didn't say anything because I had too many words, not because I didn't have any. Eli's single, darkly whispered sentence lingered at the periphery of my mind like an unquenchable ember. The blinds let in morning light, but everything seemed darker. I prepared waffles for him. His favorite is extra syrup. And he grinned as if nothing had occurred. Yes, children are resilient, but they can also act out scenarios. When he glanced down at the syrup more than at me, I could see it in his eyes. My phone rang at about noon. Unknown figure, I answered cautiously. "Marlene?" It was my mother. Her voice was syrupy smooth, like she was playing a role she hadn't quite rehearsed. "I've been meaning to call. Things have just been tense." I stayed silent. She continued. "Your father and I. Well, we've been going through a lot lately. Financial stress mostly." And then she slipped it in, casual as a breeze but cold as sleet. "You know, if we hadn't needed to help you so much during your divorce, maybe our retirement wouldn't have taken such a hit. Kendra's been picking up the slack." I sat up straighter. "What?" I said slowly. "You know." She added, her tone now edged with martyrdom. "Covering what you couldn't. The bills. The family gifts. Dinners." She stepped up. "I couldn't believe what I was hearing, Mom," I said, calm, but shaking inside. "I never asked you for help, and the only person who ever asked for money was Kendra. When she needed to borrow for her startup, Verna was quiet." Then she said, "Let's not argue over old things. What matters now is keeping peace." Calm. That word hit me like an insult. I ended the call politely and tossed my phone onto the couch. It bounced once, landing screen down, like even it didn't want to hear anymore. I didn't know Eli had been listening until I heard the soft pad of his footsteps. He stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, clutching his sketch pad to his chest. He didn't ask questions, he just walked over and gave me a quick hug before retreating to his room. It wasn't the hug that undid me. It was the silence. The fact that he already understood this was the kind of moment adults didn't want to talk about. Later that week, I stopped by the grocery store after work. Eli was at a playdate, and I thought maybe I could distract myself with something mundane like choosing pasta sauce. I turned down the baking aisle and nearly bumped into Jennifer, an old friend of the family who used to teach Eli art when he was smaller. "Marlene," she said brightly, "I just dropped off some blueberry muffins at your parents' new place. That garden of theirs. Adorable." My stomach dropped. "They're what I asked." Jennifer tilted her head. "Their new house over on Hillside Lane." "I assumed you'd been—" I gave a head shake. "No, I didn't even know they moved." Jennifer's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I really thought you knew." I nodded once, grabbed the nearest jar of tomato sauce I could find, and left the cart behind. As I walked straight out the door in the car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring out the windshield but not seeing anything. They moved and didn't tell me, not even a text. I thought of that party. The wall of photos. The door that closed on Eli's face. The missing cupcakes. The accusation that I ruined their finances. The friend who delivered muffins to a home I wasn't even allowed to know existed. This wasn't forgetfulness, it wasn't grief. It wasn't getting older or letting things go. This was a pattern, a deliberate effort to cut us out tidy. Surgical final. I didn't remember driving home. I only remembered standing in the hallway staring at the picture Eli had drawn of the family, the one Verna had tossed near the shoes. He'd redrawn it recently, hung it with painter's tape near the fridge. Everyone was still there, still smiling. And then I remembered something else when Eli was born. Verna printed his photo and said, "This baby makes us whole." Now he wasn't even worth an address. Update that night after dinner and homework, and one more cup of cocoa than I'd usually allow. Eli crawled under the covers and asked in the smallest voice, "Do you think they moved so we couldn't find them?" I sat on the edge of his bed. My hand brushed his hair, but my voice didn't come right away. "I don't know," I whispered, because anything else would have been a lie, but inside something snapped. They don't get to erase us quietly anymore by sunrise. Saturday morning, I wasn't interested in staying silent anymore. Something in me had shifted, like a door that had been cracked open for years was finally thrown wide. I made Eli breakfast, got him dressed, and grabbed the key from the drawer, the extra copy to my parents' house. They'd never once asked me to return. I didn't tell him exactly where we were going. I just said we're checking on something. And he nodded. He was always quiet in the mornings, and today wasn't any different. But I caught him glancing at me more than usual, as if he knew I wasn't in the mood to explain what was already obvious. We pulled into the driveway like we had so many times before. Only this time the place looked off. The lawn was freshly mowed. Verna always hired someone for that, but the flower beds were fading fast. The once careful rows of marigolds were wilting, the soil dry and cracked. It was like someone had pressed pause on care just long enough for everything to start unraveling. I walked up to the front door and knocked. Once, then again, no answer. I tried the key. The lock clicked, and as the door opened, I knew before I even stepped inside the house was empty. Not quiet, not just still empty. No couches, no rugs, no framed pictures. Not even the familiar tick of that ridiculous grandfather clock Verna used to brag about. I stepped in slowly. Eli's footsteps soft behind mine. The air inside was different. Hollow, stale dust patterns still marked where furniture used to be. The kitchen table gone, the wall of curated family photos stripped bare. There was no goodbye, no forwarding address, no note taped to the counter. Like you'd expect when someone moves, just blank walls and silence. I didn't cry. Not quite yet. As we stepped back out, I heard someone call from across the street. Marlene, it was Edgar, their neighbor. The same man who brought homemade pies every Thanksgiving like clockwork. He walked over slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey, I thought maybe you already knew." Knew what I asked, even though I didn't want to hear it out loud. "They moved last week, I think. Verna told me they were downsizing." "Nothing dramatic?" "Said they'd told everyone already." "Everyone but me." "Did she give you their new address?" I asked, calm as ice. He shook his head. "Nope. Just said they'd send out a Christmas card once they got settled." "That was it?" I nodded, thanked him, and turned back to the car. Eli tugged on my sleeve. "Mom." The trash bins. They were still out by the curb. 3 of them. Lid cracked, son, beating down on the plastic. Eli opened the nearest one and leaned over, squinting. Then his hand flew to his mouth. "Mom?" he said, voice shaking. "Come here." Inside, scattered like broken pieces of a timeline, were things I'd forgotten even existed. A photo of me holding Eli on his first birthday. creased and torn down the middle. One of his handmade cards smudged. Marker, crooked hearts. A little stick figure labeled Grandma. A crumpled drawing barely legible now with blocky crayon letters. Our Family. By Eli. I reached down and gently lifted the drawing. My fingertips brushed the edge of it like it might fall apart with one more second of air. I didn't cry. I just closed the lid and placed my hand on top of it like a gravestone. We got back in the car. I buckled him in. My movements were smooth, calm, deliberate. He looked out the window, not blinking. "Are we still there, family?" he inquired. This time I didn't hesitate. "No," I said, "because family doesn't throw you away." He didn't speak after that. He just rested his head against the glass, watching the houses pass as we drove off. That night after he went to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table, the one they never invited me back to, and opened my laptop. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I opened a new email subject line. Emotional exclusion and evidence of malice toward a minor. I attached pictures of the trashed artwork, the timeline of missed events, a copy of Kendra's birthday post, the voicemail from Verna about finances. Then I hit send. By noon, the next day I had a reply. Danica's voice was calm, clipped, and professional. But what she said made me feel like the ground beneath me had solidified for the first time in years. "You have a case," she said. "This isn't just emotional exclusion. It borders on psychological harm to a minor, premeditated, intentional, and well-documented." Her words came with weight, but also with something sharper. Validation. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't the hysterical daughter who took things too personally. I was a mother doing exactly what needed to be done. We spent the rest of the call going through the details. I uploaded every screenshot I had, texts from Verna, subtle guilt trips from Kendra, ignored birthday messages, backhanded responses to Eli's drawings. I even found a few old voicemails. One from Kendra last Christmas that said it might be easier if you just dropped him off. The family dynamic's been tense lately, and we don't want him feeling awkward. Danica asked if I had any recordings, I remembered. Eli's smartwatch had a voice memo feature. Sure enough, there were dozens of short files, harmless kid chatter mostly, but one of them captured the vote night clear as day. Belle's voice suggesting the vote. My name spoken like an inconvenience. Someone murmuring, "She's too sensitive." She always was. Danica's team got to work that same day. The cease and desist letter was crisp, relentless, and bulletproof. It documented emotional exclusion. It highlighted specific events. It named names. And at the heart of it all, it laid bare the evidence of harm done to a 10-year-old boy who had never once stopped loving them. I was still reviewing the PDF when I heard Eli scream from his room. I ran in heart pounding only to find him sitting upright in bed, sweat-soaked and trembling. He looked at me like I might disappear. "They threw my pictures away," he sobbed. "What if they want to throw me away too?" It broke me. I climbed into bed beside him and wrapped my arms around his little body. "They don't get to touch you again," I whispered into his hair. "You're mine, and no one throws you away." We stayed like that until he fell asleep again, his breath hitching a little less with each minute. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay beside him, watching the dark ceiling and letting the rage inside me crystallize into something useful. The next morning, the letters went out one by one, certified signed. Each adult who'd participated in Eli's exclusion received one. No prior warning. Not even a hint. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a text. I didn't post anything online. I just waited. By noon, Verna texted, "We need to talk. This has gone too far." By 3 p.m., Kendra left a voicemail dripping with performative indignation. "A lawyer? Seriously. Marlene, what is wrong with you?" I didn't respond because now it wasn't about getting them to care. It was about making sure they never had the chance to hurt him again. Later that evening, Danica called to confirm that all letters were received and legally acknowledged. "If anyone responds with anything other than full compliance," she said calmly, "we escalate. You have every right." I stared out the kitchen window while she spoke. The sun was starting to dip, casting golden light across the backyard. I imagined Eli out there again. 3 years old, chasing bubbles, yelling, "Look, Mama!" While Verna clapped and Kendra took pictures, that memory didn't sting the way it used to because now I understood the truth. They hadn't changed. I had my phone vibrated against the table 3 times in a row. Verna, then Kendra. Then, a number I didn't recognize. I didn't flinch at all. I let it buzz until the screen went dark again. Danica's words echoed in my head. If they respond with anything beyond compliance, we escalate and silence. That was me escalating. It was a strange kind of peace, this quiet refusal to engage. I'd spent years contorting myself into someone more palatable, less direct, more forgiving. Always ready with a nervous smile and a soft, "It's fine." But now, I wasn't returning their calls. I wasn't softening their blows for them anymore. That evening, after putting Eli to bed, I went into my old email to search for a lost confirmation receipt. I stumbled across a login reminder for an app we'd all used years ago to share family pictures. Out of curiosity, or maybe masochism, I clicked in. It was still active. There were dozens of new uploads, beach photos, someone's graduation, a baby shower. I hadn't been invited to. Every picture carefully filtered, every caption filled with emojis and inside jokes. I tried to comment. Access denied. I clicked through the settings. Then I saw it. Group name, real family thread. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. My chest tightened, but not with sadness. This time it was disgust. They didn't just remove me from their lives. They created a whole digital space to celebrate the exclusion. Photoshopped perfection for the world to see. No room for nuance, no room for Eli, no room for truth. The next morning, Danica forwarded me a copy of an email from Kendra's lawyer. It was thinly veiled panic disguised as professionalism. We'd like to explore a path of healing and open dialogue. Our client is concerned about the emotional escalation and believes this may be resolved without further legal action. Translation: they were scared. Scared of how it looked. Scared of what I had. Scared that maybe, just maybe, people were starting to see through the curated narrative they'd crafted for so long. And they were right to be. Later that day, I noticed something unexpected. A ripple effect. Comments on Kendra's latest Instagram post, once filled with love. This and beautiful family now had a different tone. Wait, didn't she have a sister? Wasn't her son best friends with her nephew? Didn't they all used to live nearby? It spread like wildfire, quiet but cutting. I walked into Eli's school that afternoon to pick him up, and something had shifted. The usual silence I got from other parents was replaced by nods, gentle smiles, a couple of quiet, knowing glances. Even Mr. Barnett, the PE teacher, walked by and said, "Good for you, Marlene." A lot of people would have just kept their head down. I gave a nod, throat thick, with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. I didn't feel like a victim anymore, and I wasn't the villain they'd painted either. I was the line that night after dinner. I opened a fresh document on my computer. I began organizing every email, every message, every voicemail I could remember. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Out of love for my son. For myself. I wasn't trying to get back into the family. I was building a life outside of it. One that didn't require walking on eggshells or pretending holidays didn't hurt one, that didn't rely on people who treated love like a transaction. I was halfway through sorting files when a message popped up on my phone. The name was blocked, but I knew the tone the moment I read it. "If you ruin this family, you'll regret it, Kendra." I looked at it for a while. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Words filled my head, some too sharp, some too honest. But I didn't type any of them. Not quite yet. Not now. I just let the message sit there unanswered. Let her wait. I didn't hit send. Instead, I closed the message, turned my phone over, and watched the screen go black. Kendra's threat lingered in the air like a sour aftertaste, but it didn't burn the way it used to. No more. The truth had already outlived their denials. Sunday came quiet and cool, the sky layered with soft Oregon clouds. Eli was sketching spaceships at the kitchen table while I made coffee. A strange peace settled into my chest. Uneasy, but stable until I opened my laptop. A notification popped up from an old friend of mine, Cora, someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. The message was short. "You okay with it?" She included a screenshot. Kendra had posted a photo on Facebook and Instagram. A family portrait. Professionally lit, posed in front of their new house. The caption read, "3 generations, real roots, real love, #family first, #gratitude." In the photo, Verna Cliff, Kendra, her husband, their kids. No Eli, no me. Not even cropped, just non-existent. The final photo added. I didn't recoil. I didn't cry. I sat there and read the caption again, like it was a headline from some other life. But the internet didn't stay quiet. Someone reposted the image with a comment that sliced like glass. Didn't your sister just take legal action over child exclusion? Real love. Then came the waves comments stacking up under her post like bricks falling one after the other. Where's your nephew? Wasn't your sister part of this family? This is sad. Not sweet. By noon, Kendra had disabled comments on the post. By 3 p.m., she locked her profile completely. I didn't say a word. I didn't hit, didn't send a snarky DM, didn't feed the flames. I didn't have to. Later that night, Danica called. There's been movement. She said, her tone measured. Vernice Church sent a request for character references from the congregation. Apparently, concerns have been raised. I sat still holding my tea. What kind of concerns? Community complaints. A few referencing behavior inconsistent with church leadership values. They didn't mention names, but we know the irony wasn't lost on me. Verna had always played the matriarch. Saint Sunday dresses, volunteer, drives home-baked casseroles. But saints don't leave their grandchild's artwork in the trash. Kendra's business, meanwhile, a boutique real estate agency she'd launched a few years back, was suddenly flooded with anonymous one-star reviews. I read one of them aloud, barely suppressing a smirk. Sells houses but forgets what a home means. That week, a parenting forum I followed reposted an anonymized version of our case under the headline, How to Handle Generational Exclusion Without Losing Yourself. I didn't write it, but someone out there, maybe someone watching quietly, had been paying attention, and maybe they saw themselves in it. That evening, a voicemail came in from a blocked number, Verna. Her voice was tight, brittle, like she'd been holding her breath for days. You prevail, she said flatly. Happy now? We just wanted peace, that word peace. It settled in my chest like dust on old glass. They didn't want peace, they wanted silence. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Danica. She told me she'd log it. Not as legal leverage, but closure. It didn't need to be used. It just needed to be heard. Later that night, while brushing his teeth, Eli looked up at me in the mirror and said, They miss us now, don't they? I didn't blink. I just rinsed my mouth and met his eyes. Missing someone doesn't mean you treated them right. And that was that. No revenge, no firestorm, just the soft crack of a wall coming down. Missing. Someone doesn't mean you treated them right. Those words became the quiet anthem of my next few weeks. They echoed. Not in anger, not in triumph, just in truth. And truth, I've learned, doesn't have to shout, it just has to exist. 3 weeks passed, no new texts, no calls, no surprise, knock at my door, just silence. But this time I didn't feel like I was drowning in it. This time the silence felt like mine. Eli and I started walking the lake trail every Sunday morning. It had become our new ritual. No more forced family dinners or tension-wrapped holidays, just a thermos of coffee, a juice box, and a quiet little path that didn't care what anyone's last name was. We'd stop at the bench by the water's edge. Dean's bench, I used to sit there with him when Eli was barely big enough to swing his legs off the edge. Now Eli sat cross-legged beside me, sketchbook open, tongue poking out in concentration as he tried to draw a heron lifting off from the reeds. Looks like it's flying away from something, he said one morning, shading in the wings. Or towards something, I replied. That bench didn't feel like a grave anymore. It felt like a starting point. A few days later, I checked the mailbox on my way back from the grocery store and found an envelope tucked between bills and coupons. No return address. My name written in Vernon's exact rigid cursive. I didn't open it in the car. I waited until Eli was in his room humming while building a spaceship out of Legos. The card was plain, cream-colored. No design inside, just one line scribbled in that same familiar pen. We didn't think you'd go this far. Maybe we misunderstood you. Maybe we were wrong. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a breadcrumb masquerading as reconciliation. I folded it back up and walked to my bedroom. Pulled open the drawer where I kept Eli's first birthday photo, the one I'd found in their trash. I placed the card underneath it. They could stay buried together Saturday morning as always. Edgar came by. Same time, same bag of sugar cookies, same dusty sweater. That probably hadn't changed since 1997. He didn't ask about the letter. He never brought up Verna, Cliff, or Kendra. Instead, he challenged Eli to a chess match and lost gloriously for the 4th week in a row. Eli giggled. "You're letting me win again." Edgar winked. "Or maybe you're just getting too sharp for me." That kind of loyalty. Simple, quiet. Without conditions. It used to feel foreign. Now it just felt safe. That week, I went to therapy for the first time in years. I told my therapist everything. She listened without flinching, without filling in my pauses. At the end of the session, she said something I'll never forget. "What they did to you wasn't personal, but your healing has to be." And I realized she was right. I wasn't doing this to prove them wrong anymore. I wasn't doing it to be included or validated. I was doing it to be free. That night, I opened my journal. One I hadn't touched since before the divorce. I wrote, "I didn't lose a family. I escaped one. And now we're building something better. Not louder, not bigger, but safer." I closed the cover, and I felt full for the first time in a long time. Later that evening, after brushing his teeth and climbing into bed, Eli looked at me and asked, "Do you think they still think about us?" I tucked the blanket under his chin and smoothed his hair. "Maybe," I said, "but thinking about someone doesn't fix what you did to them." He nodded slowly, eyes heavy with sleep. "I'm glad it's just us," he mumbled. "Me too, baby," I whispered. "Me too." To anyone reading this, watching this, if you've ever been the quiet one in the room, the one who was told to just keep the peace, to take the high road, to not make a scene, I hope you hear me now. Your silence was never a weakness. It was just waiting for the right time. And now it's your time. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come with shouting matches or slam doors. It comes in the quiet erasure of who we are. Marlene's story reminds us that choosing peace isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about protecting the space where you're truly seen and loved. Have you ever had to walk away from someone to find yourself? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, stories of strength, truth, and healing, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Your voice matters here. Your story might be next.